Hi guys, welcome back to another segment of Unmasking the Truth. And today, look who I have, Christophe Barot, a political advisor. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, I did a lot of political action for the union, but I'm in a different role now. But politics is definitely a big thing of what I do at the union.
So basically, you would say that's your passion, right?
Yes, that's the
You're
reason.
very passionate about it. Okay, so then I'm going to ask you, can you tell my viewers or members or subscribers a little bit about yourself?
Sure. So I actually was born in Hungary, in Budapest, and my family and I emigrated to Canada in 1989. And since we're talking about politics, I think it's, I think like a lot of immigrant families to Canada, one of the first things that we were told was the reason you're here is because of Pierre Trudeau and the Liberal Party, right? So that's really how I really started to get into politics. But we came here, my aunt and my uncle sponsored us to Canada. And I think, like most immigrant families, the first, years were not easy.
Of course.
A lot of challenges especially for my dad. My dad was 67 when I was born. So I was a very late baby in his life. So both of my parents, it was very hard to, the culture shock of Canada.
Of course, because that's like moving from a place that you know to a place that is totally foreign to you and no family, just them, right?
Well, my aunt and my uncle were here to sponsor us, but that was all of the rest of the family, and their lives and experiences were, obviously in Hungary, right?
So do you think that there were any, like say for example, anything put into place that could have made the transition a little easier for your folks?
For sure. I mean, I think, the support that we got from my aunt and uncle was like the bedrock. That without them, we wouldn't have been able to come here. But, the education system, obviously my parents, especially my dad later in his life, but my mom too, entering the job market. English is a second language. And there were programs in place, but, basic programs. So those, obviously showing those things would have been much helpful for sure.
So you said that you were politics was your big forte, basically, in the union, right? That you're in, and but you've transitioned, you've moved. So I want to tell me, how involved were you in politics? Like the big whole,
So the majority of the time I was a volunteer for parties, right? So I volunteered for Liberal Party at one point with the NDP. So I did a lot of like the canvassing, and then later in my life I became more involved in the back scenes, like building websites and coming up with strategy and communication for some candidates. So I did some of that work, but the majority of my political action work was with the union, helping the union put together political education programs and then campaigns during previous elections.
Sounds really good. So you were really rounded in that, right?
I often say that like I was never big into sports as a kid, so politics became my sports, right?
I'm happy that you say that, because now I want you to give us a little bit of a education. I want you to tell us the difference between like the federal election, the provincial election, and also the municipal election. Is it possible for you to tell us,
Sure,
teach us
absolutely.
about that?
So the Canadian Constitution gives the 3 different levels of government different powers, right? So the federal government is in charge of anything that is to do with international matters, right? And then anything that touches on issues that affect more than one province, right?
Okay.
So when you think of like, for example, the military, obviously the federal government's in charge of that. Taxation, income tax, because the entire country pays income tax, right? So that's a federal government jurisdiction. Banks, rules for banks, again, affect more than one province, so that's federal government, and the list goes on. For example, I had to do with air traffic, also federal government, because it affects more than one province.
Yeah.
Then the provinces have more responsibilities on things that touch people's life, I think, on a more daily basis, like healthcare, education, roads, and and then the municipal government is actually given powers by the provincial government.
So the municipal government is that's your MPP, right?
No, that's
It's
your
not?
councillor, right?
Those are your
So you, like here in Brampton, right? You
Right.
have your city councillors for Brampton, and then you have regional councillors for Peel.
So then when people are saying reach out to your MPP, who are they really telling us to reach out to?
So your provincial government, right? So you have federally, you have your MPs, your members of parliament. Provincially, you have your MPPs, your members of provincial parliament, and then municipally, depending on where you live, but you have either city councillors or and regional councillors.
So is it fair to say that your MPP should be much easier to reach opposed to your like Mr. Ford?
Yes, I mean Ford's an MPP too,
Okay,
right?
but go ahead.
That's right. No, but like obviously when you have an MPP that's the premier or has a ministerial role, they're harder to reach because they have more responsibilities, right?
But then how come we're told to reach out to them if it seems impossible? Because you could call from now until next year. It's like you're always getting either a voicemail or their system is down or whatnot. How do one reach out to one that is unreachable?
So the core answer to that is it's their duty to reach back out to you, right? If you call, your email, I mean, that is what our political system is built on. That's what the core responsibility that an MPP councillor has, is to communicate with their constituents, the people who live in their riding or our ward, and to answer their questions. That is a core responsibility. And quite frankly, what I do every election, when I'm still undecided, is I call those election offices and say, listen, if you want my vote, I need the candidate to call me and talk to me for 5 minutes, right? During elections, they're far more responsive, right? Because they want their vote, right?
You know, because I've never, right now, Trudeau is in Cambridge and I've never heard of it. So I thought that was a whirl, right? And so tell me something. Can you explain what does it mean to lobby? I'm always hearing this word, lobby your government.
That's right.
What does it mean to lobby the government?
So lobbying, I mean, listen, I think there's two kind of different ways. So lobbying is really pushing the government to act on an issue that is important, right?
Oh, like healthcare and wages?
Correct, right?
Wow.
So, for example, I'll use pandemic pay, right?
Yeah.
Which I know a very contentious issue, but like unions had to lobby the government to bring in pandemic pay, right? And that really involves in getting together a position with evidence, with facts, and going to the government and saying you need to do this because of X, Y, and Z,
Right.
and putting pressure on the government, different MPPs, people who are elected, non-elected, to push an issue forward and put something into law. That's what lobbying is.
And forgive me for being so like a negative Nancy here, but they're so hard to reach. Why should they talk to little old me? You know, will they? I know you said that in election time. You said if you want my vote, you gotta give me 5 minutes. But if every Dick, Tom, and Harry, and Susan and Jane, when is my turn?
Yeah.
You know, it's hard.
It is definitely, it's hard, and I mean, I think, listen, Kelly, what I would say is, and this is where we kind of start talking about other issues too, but it depends on your power, right? Obviously, if let's say a president of a big corporation reaches out, they get their call returned like that.
Of course,
right?
Yeah.
If you or
Money
I
talks.
call, sometimes it doesn't get returned because that's what MPP, especially. I don't know. I think you have a conservative MPP here.
We're going to touch on that.
Okay, fair enough.
Let's just wait a little bit
Yeah.
because I have a question in regards to that.
Okay.
So you've talked about lobbying, what lobbying means. What can you explain to them what's a write-in?
Sure.
Because you never hear your area, you hear your write-in.
Yes.
What is can you clarify write-in?
Sure. So writing is also called, there's a lot of different acronyms in politics, is your election district, right? So I think for right now in Brampton West, that's the name of the riding. I live in Don Valley North. So the riding is a geographical area in which, based on your postal code, is where you vote for a candidate, right? Usually, ridings are around 110,000 people, so that's how they divide it, right? So downtown Toronto, 110,000 people is a very small area. If you go up north, where I was just up north in Campus Casing, you're looking at like, thousands of kilometers could be a riding, because it's usually an area that encompasses 110,000 people.
And out there it's less.
It's less dense,
yeah.
right?
So, okay, that's a write-in. So, like a lot of people, like I was shocked when I voted in my first federal election, because I know the candidate who I wanted to vote for. So I was going with the expectation of seeing that person's face or name on the ballot, but that was not the case.
No, yeah.
What I noticed is there were a bunch of names that I had no idea who these individuals were.
That's right. That's right.
How does that work?
So if you want to vote for Justin Trudeau, you have to live in Papineau, Quebec, because that's where he's the MP.
Yeah.
If you want to vote for Jagmeet Singh, you have to go to BC and live in Burnaby, BC, because that's where he is,
yeah.
right? So each party nominates a person to represent their party in the riding.
Right. But this is the question also. I get that. But what if in your writing, say and this is a say, if I wanted to vote for the liberal person, right? But in my writing, the liberals never win. They never win because it's a conservative area. And this is just an example, people.
Yeah.
So if I'm voting for liberal, which I know that they will never win, isn't that vote like a wasted vote?
So you're touching on one of my big kind of things that I disagree with the whole system. Yes, in theory you're right? Because what we have in Canada and in the UK and in the US is called first past the post, which means the scenario that you're talking about, unless you vote for the candidate that wins, your vote is basically thrown out. It doesn't go against electing. Most of the world uses something called proportional representation, which I'm not that probably could do another podcast on that. But what that system is exactly what you're talking about, is the party that forms the government, it's based on percentages, right? So I'll give you a very quick example. Right now, in Ontario, Doug Ford won the election with 42% of the vote, right? So most common sense would, well, he gets 42%, the Conservative Party gets 42% of the seats. No, they got 67% of the seats because they won more ridings, right? In a different system, in proportional representation, he would only get 42% of the seats because that's how many votes he got, right? But that's not our system, right? So what you're talking about, Kelly, is strategic voting, right? So full disclosure, I am a card-carrying New Democrat NDP member, right?
Why are you a NDP when aren't they the ones who brought in the Bob Ray Day where you work 5 days and you only get paid 4?
Yes.
They cut healthcare money, didn't they?
No, they didn't cut healthcare. You're talking about the Ray Days. I remember the Ray Days. So I don't want to relitigate that stuff because I was a kid, so I don't know fully about it.
Me too, but I was talking to an aunt yesterday, and that's one of the things that she said to me, don't vote NDP, because they're the ones who, why would you want to bring back somebody like that where the potential of that happening is there?
So very quickly, what happened with the Ray Days is the province was in horrible economic situation, right? So they had two options. Either we lay off thousands of public servants, or every public servant takes 10 paid days off. And in that decision, Bob Ray and the NDP government made a decision, said, you know what, we're not going to lay off thousands of people. We're going to ask everyone just to take 10 days unpaid off. So some people disagree with that. I get it. But I would say when you're in that situation where you're going to lay off thousands of people or get everyone to lose 10 days pay, they've been
that was a fair, okay.
Right?
In order to have people in jobs.
That's right.
Okay, so you're saying that they picked the best of the two evils.
Two bad options, right?
Okay,
yeah.
So can you explain to me the difference between a constitutional right and a fundamental right.
Okay. So you're talking about the Charter of Rights and Freedoms,
Right.
right? So there's different. So you have rights that are with fundamental rights, and those are about your health and safety, about your liberty, about living in a society that is protects people's fundamental human rights, your right to vote, your right to move across Canada. Those are your fundamental rights.
Okay.
And then you have another section of rights in there which are more, I would say, administrative, right?
Okay.
And those are the kind of the rights that affect more the government's influence on your life, like how the voting system works. So there's different kind of tiers, and I think in the mandatory vaccination issue, this is coming up.
That's what
That's the
I
issue.
wanted to get to, because that's what a lot of people were saying. They have that right to refuse or to say, I don't want that thing in my body. But
That's right.
at the end of the day, you're still forced to do what they want you to do. So doesn't that mean that you have no rights?
So I think what's important for us to realize is we're not the U.S., right? In the U.S. Constitution, people have absolute rights, right? So your freedom of speech, you can say whatever you want in the States, right? In Canada, we don't, right? In Canada...
Do you hear that, guys? Can you say that again? Say it loud.
The Charter of Rights and Freedoms does not give people absolute rights.
You don't have the rights like the U.S.
It's
people.
A different system.
We cannot just say whatever we want and think it's okay. No, it's not.
What the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms says is that people have rights up to the point, and I'm making a general statement. It's much more technical than this, but you have rights up to the point of infringing someone else's rights, right? So in Canada, we have the freedom of speech up to hate speech. Once you start inciting hate or violence or distrust of other people, then your right freedom of speech stops, right? In the U.S., that doesn't exist. Same with the mandatory vaccinations. You have a right, of course, and you do, of saying no to an injection or no to something. You have your liberty rights up to the point of endangering other people's health and safety.
That's when that trumps everything else.
Right. So in the States, it's about individual rights. In Canada, it's about collective rights.
So then, why should we... Okay, tell us, why should we vote? What's the importance of us voting?
Okay. So I would say like this way, Kelly, like if you had your long-term care worker, if you had the ability to vote for your DOC every year or every 4 years, wouldn't you take the opportunity to do it?
It depends, because if I feel like, and this is a tricky question too, because if that's the only person that is available, then of course you have to vote. But what if I'm not liking what that person is doing, but there is no other option? Then that's where I say you know what, I rather not vote.
Yeah, I get it. But I would challenge that, Kelly, by saying things are not going to change if people don't vote.
So that's the importance.
That's the important part of it, right? You can look at it from and at the end of the day, Kelly, I agree that when you look at the different candidates and all these election promises, 75% of them is not going to happen.
Thank
right?
you.
It's like getting a Christmas wish list from your kid, right?
Right.
However, what does matter, and you see it happening in Ontario with the Ford government or in previous elections, what does matter is where these leaders and parties' ideology in these situations, how they're going to make decisions, what are they going to look at. That is the fundamental choice you have at the ballot, because you know the history of all these parties, you know the history of these leaders for the most part, and you know that when they make decisions, what are they going to prioritize?
Yes.
That is the big thing. And I agree, the system's broken, the system needs to be reset. It disadvantages a lot of working class, marginalized communities.
Yes.
It favors people who are affluent, but things are not going to change unless people get out there and vote. And these politicians know that. And the reason they're not returning your call or not passing laws that are really favoring people that need the help is because they know they don't vote. So why I'm gonna go
waste
out?
time on them when they're not even
That's
making
right.
it. That is so sad.
And that's the truth, though.
Well, you're making me want to cry because this is the thing. Like right now, let's look at each party individually, right? Like right now, Mr. Trudeau is saying that, and listen to what I'm saying because I'm going to ramble. He's saying that if, and the operative word, people, is if I get elected, I'm going to put PSW wages at $25. Is that what he's saying, like a minimum wage to start as a PSW? $25. Now, he's in power right now. Mm-hmm. What is stopping him from doing it right now? He's still the prime minister, isn't he? So why can't he do that now and say, you know what, if elected, I'm going to make this even better?
Yeah.
So should we believe anything that he's saying when he has the power right now, but yet still he's not even trying to do anything? What do you have to say about that?
So to your first question, why didn't he do it when he was in power? I mean,
and he's still in power, ain't he?
He is. I mean, the parliament's absolved, so he can pass anything right now. Mm-hmm. But I get your point. So I can talk. Okay, let me first say structurally, he can't do it because the provincial government has to agree. Number one, right?
That's so, Mr. Ford. People.
That's Mr. Ford, and people need to know that before the election was called, there was $1 billion that was going to be sent from Ottawa to Queen's Park, from the federal government to the provincial government to shore up long-term care. Mm-hmm. But the federal government said, we'll give you this $1 billion for long-term care, but here are the rules. You have to be accountable for the money. You have to put it in certain places. And the Ford government said, no.
He didn't want it?
We're not going to take the money if you're going to tell us how to spend it.
Oh, so he wants to get the money, but he don't want you to tell him how to use it.
That's right. Because the federal government's thing was like, we want to make sure it's not going into the pockets of for-profit corporations. It's being spent on addressing the issues with long-term care. And Ford said, I'll take the money, but if you're going to tell me how to spend it, then forget it, right? And this is a constant kind of battle between the federal governments and the provinces.
So then when Mr. Ford is saying that, oh, the PSWs are my friends, they're heroes, then he doesn't really mean it, because you're getting $1 billion to make better, and you're saying, no, I don't want it because you're telling me how to use it.
That's right. Yeah.
So then what should we think about that? People, he's not your friend. No. I keep saying that, Mr. Ford, you're not our friends. No. Mr. Jagmeet Singh, his platform right now is to end for-profit homes.
That's right.
So if he ends for-profit homes, I work for a for-profit home, what would happen to somebody like me?
Yeah, and that's a problem, Ken, with these election promises. People, like even now, I was watching a press conference with the Conservative leader. He unveiled some small business grant, and then reporters asked, okay, that's great, but how are you going to do it? They don't have answers, because these are just vague ideological or campaign promises, right? Half of these things are not going to be implemented. Probably more than half are not going to be implemented. How that would work, Kelly, in theory, is as their licenses expire, it would be basically either the municipal government or the provincial government that takes over these homes.
Oh.
That's how it would work.
But is that possible though? Is it logical?
I mean, I think it's logical when you see how long-term care is working right now, as you see it every day, right? It wouldn't be an easy or clean process for sure, but if the government of the day, both provincially, and that's key, provincially and federally, think it's time to end for-profit long-term care, which I completely agree with, they were gonna have to work out how that works.
So let me throw you a side question here, because just the other day, the home that how do you say this? Okay, I'm going to say the home, but it's like, because it's all a corporation, right? And this one is a really big one. They're offering us, they're giving us shares, and we can buy into it. So what's the catch? I asked what's the catch. They said that there's no catch, but I don't believe that there is no catch. There has to be a catch.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about when their license or whatever ends, then the government could step in. If you have staff like me who owns part of these companies, what are the odds like we're going to fight back?
Exactly. That's exactly the catch, Kelly.
So I told you guys that there is a catch.
The catch is then, for workers or for unions to represent workers, then to say, well, you need to up wages, you need to improve working conditions. The corporations first is going to be like, oh, well, they're shareholders. They have the ability to vote on the corporate philosophy or the approach. Of course, it would be, you guys would have like a sliver of their shares.
Of course.
Vast majority is owned by basically Wall Street and them, right? But it would change the dynamic. So they would say, well, yes, they're employees, but they're also shareholders, so they have the ability to do this. So it's a coy. It's a coy.
I do know that. Yeah. I saw through it. I saw through the smoke. People can't say I didn't talk to you guys about that. It's nice that you can come and actually shine some light on this, because I know that I don't explain it the way how you do, but I'm happy that you actually did just that. Absolutely. Thank you so very much.
No, thank you.
You understand. So tell me something. As healthcare workers, right? Who do you think we should... okay, first let me say this. I know that voting is... it's private. It's confidential. But from your opinion, and we can give our opinion. We're free to give our opinion. Sure. As a healthcare worker, which one of these candidates would you tell me to vote for, and my family and my colleagues?
So listen, I was a hospital worker for 14 years, right? And I came into working in the hospital after I got out of high school at the tail end of the Harris government, which was a conservative government, and the healthcare system was in complete crisis. Staffing-wise, equipment-wise, everything. It was just less and less money. Conservatives, historically in Canada, have never been a big proponent of universal healthcare and increasing universal healthcare, right? So I, as a former healthcare worker, and now obviously having the privilege of working for healthcare workers, I would never vote Conservative, because their track record on healthcare has always been twofold. Greater role of the private sector in the delivery of healthcare, and also the minimizing the funding of healthcare, right? That has been, no matter who's been the leader, it's always been the same mantra. They always go back to those two things. Let's privatize, let's decrease funding, right? The Liberals are, with basically everything, they're in the middle, right? So do they look at increased role for private sector in healthcare? Sometimes yes, but they truly do believe that I think universal healthcare is a bedrock of Canadian society, and we need to maintain it. The NDP is about increasing, right? So they want to look at the Canada Health Act, which is the law that regulates universal healthcare in Canada. They want to look at ending for-profit long-term care, as you mentioned, bringing in home care as a part of the healthcare system. So you could look at it, the Conservatives are always about reduction. The Liberals are basically maintaining the status quo, right? And then the NDP is about increasing and improving. The Liberals do increase and improve on certain areas. Like, I think important for your viewers to know is like the pandemic pay. Yes. Which was, I know, controversial. Everyone should have gotten it, and the union was fighting tooth and nail to make sure that happens. But 80% of the money that got paid in pandemic pay came from the federal government, not from Ford. Yeah. Right? So it was Trudeau that gave the money to the provinces and said, Ford, you have to give this to the frontline workers. Right? As you said before, he was giving him $1 billion again, and he said no, because how dare you tell me how to spend it? Yeah, right? Exactly. So those are things. So listen, I think, and I hate saying this, but it's the truth. If you are not voting for the Conservatives, you have to look, as you mentioned, in your writing, what is the dynamic, right? If it is a Conservative versus an NDP battle, then I would vote for the NDP. If it is a Conservative versus a Liberal battle, I would vote for the Liberals. And I hate saying that, because I am tired of elections that you're voting against stuff, not for stuff. I am sick of it. And we can, again, spend another podcast talking about why that is and how to fix it. But in a 3-party system, and yes, we have 6 parties, but 3 major parties, you always are going back to the same kind of dynamic. Is am I voting based on my conscience and my beliefs and supporting a party I believe in, or am I trying to block a certain party from getting into power? And that's the sad situation, but that's the reality. That's the truth.
So, question, what's at risk?
A lot's at risk. And again, going back to I hate always kind of scaring people to vote.
And
but that's the reality. Yeah.
Okay, and I don't want to talk over you,
Yeah.
but you see, okay, people call me selfish, but when I do speak, I'm speaking on behalf of healthcare workers. So whenever I ask you anything, it's not based on the general public. I'm sorry, but as it is, you know that as healthcare workers, we are at the bottom of the food chain. I'm going to say that because we're paid less than nothing. We are burnt out. We struggle. Everything we have to fight tooth and nail. So when I say what's at risk for us?
For healthcare workers.
Yes.
So I think there's a couple of things at risk. Like I said, the history, and I think if you discount everything they're saying today and just look at what they've done in the past, which is I think a better indication of who to vote for, conservatives have always hurt healthcare. Always hurt healthcare. End of story, full stop. The big thing, and this is more, it affects healthcare workers, but affects everybody, is if the conservatives win, they will have the magic formula in the Constitution, which is called the amending formula, which means that they can reopen the Constitution and change certain elements of it. And I would say that if that's going to happen, it is very likely that the changes will not benefit healthcare workers or working people in general, right? And I know that's kind of like a far out kind of a legalese kind of a thing, but it could have severe impacts on it. What other things are at risk is, for example, as you said, we're healthcare workers, and I knew because I was a healthcare worker too. You don't have a lot of economic power, right? Unfortunately, we should, but we don't. Another conservative idea, and that's the first thing that he announced when the election stopped it, he's stopping all benefit programs, right? To do with the pandemic. So CERB, the small business credits, I think he wants to stop, and pandemic pay, the funding from the federal government for pandemic pay and PSW wage enhancement, those things may stop very quickly if he gets elected.
So did you hear that, people? Go ahead and say it again. This is what's at risk. We need to take note. This is at risk. The pandemic pay is going to... Well, how can he come in and read and undo everything that has made our lives even just a smidgen little bit better?
Because he has the power to. He has the... If O'Toole becomes the next Prime Minister of Canada and the Conservatives win the election, which unfortunately right now it's looking like it's a real possibility, then he has absolute power. Now, what would be difficult for him is more than likely he would get a minority, right? Which means he would need to have agreement from the other two parties to do anything. However, think about this, Kelly. If he wins and his first bill that which he said he would be to cut all these programs, what would be the appetite of the other parties to vote against him? Because then we would be another election a couple of weeks after the previous election. So the most likely they would just sit there and not vote and let it pass, knowing that they couldn't force another election. So because if you're Prime Minister of Canada or the Premier of Ontario, based on our government system, they have not absolute, but close to absolute power to change laws and change programs.
But forgive me, because I feel like we're caught between a rock and a hard place, because we're screwed no matter what, I feel like. Because, look, I know you're good, because I know you have your own thinking, but I want clarity. We're talking about repeal Bill 124.
Yes.
Who wants to take away our rights to have unions to talk for us?
Doug Ford.
So what party is that?
Conservative. So...
why they want to do that? Why would they want to take away our rights to make decisions?
Because it doesn't matter if it's federally or provincially, right? The whole idea behind the Conservative Party and the conservative movement is small government, less regulation, and less involvement of the government in people's lives and lower taxes, right? So if and that's the base that they would basically make all decisions out of, right? So if you look at Bill 124, they said, well, we can't, quote unquote, they can, but we can't afford to give people in the public sector more and more increases. So we're going to bring in a law to limit how much they can get at the bargaining table. And that fits into that smaller taxes, smaller government, less intrusion of the government into people's lives, right? Because their thing is always bring down taxes, and if you bring down taxes, people have more money to spend in the economy, but we know that's not true. It's true for the top, but not for the working class.
No.
So that's what all these decisions are made out of. And the other bill that we fought really against was about silencing healthcare workers during the election.
Yeah.
That was, again, looking at, they were afraid. They were afraid that members like you are going to speak up and tell about what happened in long-term care, what happened in hospitals, what the Ford government failed to do. And they know that because the superpower healthcare workers have is that you are respected by the public.
Yes.
So
we know that.
So when you talk about what happened and what the solution is, people listen up because they respect you.
Yeah.
Right? And that's what they're afraid of.
But the thing is, we can't pretend like COVID never happened.
Of course not.
And it's still going on now. And that's
sure.
even one of the questions that I'm asking, why an election now when we're looking at the fourth wave of the Delta variants? They're saying it's the cases are increasing so rapidly. So why even put anyone else at risk to go out there and vote? And another thing that they're saying is that this is going to be one of the most costly elections. Mm-hmm. Can you explain to us why? Because anything that is costly, it's costing us. Mm-hmm. We don't make money as it is, but yet still they're trying to do things that's going to cost us. Why is it the most costly?
It's most costly because of as you pointed out, all of the precautions they have to take.
That's
right?
what I thought.
So this election, personally, Kelly, I think it was a complete mistake. Complete mistake. They shouldn't have called this election.
But
right?
Isn't it strategic though? What is it that he stands to gain? Must be thinking his people went out there and did the poll or whatnot and say, you know what? The iron is hot, strike now.
100%.
It has to be. But when you look at the polls on TV, I mean, the conservatives aren't too far behind him.
They're leading now. They're leading.
See, there you go.
Yeah,
so then, and the polls are usually right? Somewhat.
Yes.
Somewhat. Look at the states.
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, in 2012, they were way off, right? They said Hillary Clinton was going to win by a wide margin, and every pollster was just totally wrong. But to your point, yes, they thought they had an opportunity, the Liberals, to get a majority government, and they were afraid of the fourth wave, so they said, if not now, when? Right?
Right.
And then they called it. It was a mistake. They shouldn't have done it. I totally agree to that. But, we have to put that into the whole other package of issues, right?
So one issue that I'm going to bring up that is kicking us in the face right now is look at what's going on in Afghanistan. Mm-hmm. Look at what's going on in Haiti, right? I have a question, and I'm not being racist or anything, but I look at things holistically because I remember when they went to was it the Syrians, and they brought over people from Syria because they were in trouble, right? That's right. And now Afghanistan, they're in trouble, and they're bringing over 20,000. Haiti has gone through earthquake before, and all they did was stretch out a helping hand to say, here's some food, some bedding, some healthcare supplies. Here it is. Haiti is going through something again. How come I've never heard of let's go into, I'm not Asian, but I'm going to speak on anything that I feel that I need to speak on. How come I've not heard, let's go into Haiti and take out 5 people then and bring them to Canada? Yeah. What is it that is different from Haiti, that is different from Syria, that is different from Afghanistan? What is it? Is it a color thing?
So just on the Haiti issue, what's important to know too is a lot of that money that was fundraised to help out Haitians during the earthquake and the hurricane disappeared. disappeared.
Where did it go?
Right? No one knows where the hell it went, but they didn't go to the people that need it. That's for sure. That's one issue, right? But the other issue, to your point, listen, I can give you like the the structural kind of explanation. So in Afghanistan, the people that are getting these special visas to come to Canada and to the U.S. and to Britain are the people that helped the military when they were there, right? And they risked their life, right? They said, I'll translate. And they were shoulder to shoulder with the Canadian forces.
Right.
So those people and their families, because people know that they're going to be targeted by the Taliban because they helped the West. They're trying to be evacuated. I mean, the whole process is just a huge mistake, and the way it was executed is a shame. The Western countries should be ashamed of how that whole Afghanistan situation turned out. But to your point about Haiti, it's about, and I would say this, forgive me for saying it, but if Haitian Canadians were political power, if people knew that they would go and vote.
I know that. I think they're thinking that the Asians are not progressive enough. They're not contributing to Canadian society enough. I'm going to say that.
Okay.
We're going to leave it at that because that is something that is a big topic that needs its own show. And I'm going to let you rest on that and think about that so that you can come back here and talk to me about that, right? But the question, one thing I want you to tell us before you go is, as healthcare workers, and believe me, we don't have time. We run from one job to one job, and then we have our families to come home and take care of, right? Where should we find the time? And how can we find the time to go and vote?
That's right. So to answer, I'm going to answer two answers there. Number one, the system does not want working people and people of color and marginalized communities and to vote. Because if the system truly wanted that to happen, then elections would be held on a Monday from 9 to 9. In most countries, again, the former colonial countries excluded Canada, US, and Britain, elections are held over 2 or 3 days, including weekends. In some countries, the national holiday, the election day, to enable people to vote. The legal answer to that is the Employment Standards Act provides 3 continuous hours for each worker to go and vote on election day. However, let me just finish this. It says you must have a 3-hour window between 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. to vote. If you're working 7:30 to 3:30, doesn't apply to you because you have 3:30 onwards to vote. The only time it really applies, or the same if you're working 1 to 8, let's say, it doesn't apply because you have the morning to vote. Where it does apply is if you're working 12 hours, let's say 7:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m., like a lot of nurses work and some PSWs, then in theory, based on that law, you can leave at 6:30 after you've told your manager because you're guaranteed a 3-hour window to vote between the polling period.
So that means if people, from my understanding, if you have 2 jobs where you're leaving, where you go from one from 7 to 3 and you got to be at the other one at 4 to whatever time, you don't get that 3 hours because there was a break. It's your business that you went and pick up your next job. So that doesn't apply to you. So then it blocks you.
I would challenge that. I would still say that, let's say if you do have, and that's the reality of a lot of people, they have 2 or 3 jobs, I would still make that argument, right? But I would make it in the unionized workplace if one's unionized, right? Not the one that's not unionized. So I would still make that, hey, listen, like, yes, I'm done at 3:30, but I start my next job at 5:30. I need some time to vote. Hopefully they would do, and I would talk to your union rep on trying it. They don't have a legal obligation, but I would hope most employers would allow that. But to your other question too about the whole being blocked to vote, you also have advance polls, right?
Right.
So that usually is for a week, usually about 5 days before the actual, you have a 5-day window to go and cast a ballot, an advance ballot, right? And I encourage people to always, that's how I never vote on election day because I'm busy. I always vote on the advance polls. You go to elections.ca, you put in your postal code, and they'll give you exactly where you can.
So right here. Elections.ca. Elections.ca.
Yeah.
We're going to have it right here, the website, right?
That's
the
right.
link, right?
Yeah, the federal government. Yeah.
Okay. So, for people out there who don't know, because you can't just get up and run and say you're gonna go vote, right? Can you tell them the criterias, like what must need to be done, and you have to be in order to vote?
And I disagree with all of these too, but the requirements of voting are you have to be 18 years of age.
Hello, I have two that are 18.
I know, and there's been a lot of conversation about lowering it down to 16, which I'm in favor of. So you have to be 18 years of age, you have to be a Canadian citizen, which I disagree with as well. And then you have to be a resident of the riding in which you're voting. You have to prove that.
You got to prove it.
You have to prove that you are
so the
resident.
proof that you need would be maybe
so you usually need 2 pieces of ID to vote. You need something with your picture on it. That's a government issue. Passport, immigration card, license. Those are your identity, and then you have to have another piece of ID that proves your address, right?
Like a piece of mail?
A mail from like a bank or your T4 or something, right?
Of that nature.
To prove your identity and to prove your residency.
So what do you have to say to your young people out there in terms of voting?
Don't get disillusioned, right? And it's very easy to do that because you see how politics works. You see how, how sometimes shady and unclear and all these side deals that are made. But my key message to everybody would be, if you don't vote, if you don't participate in the system and challenge the system, nothing is going to change. If you look at history, all of the big advantages, all the things that have made society step forward has not been because of politicians or politics. It's because working people predominantly and people in general rose up and said, no, enough of this. Change it. And that's when governments take action, right? A true revolution will only happen if people stand up, they vote, and after they vote, they are holding these politicians accountable and keep pressing them like you're doing, lobbying them and calling them until they're tired of listening to you about what needs to happen. That's the only way in history things have changed.
And I would say that especially to our racialized and minorities out there, especially us as healthcare workers, our voices really need to be heard, especially right now in today's climate. We've gone through COVID-19 and we're still going through it. And we've fought for the PPEs, we fought for the pay, we fought for better quality of work life. And it's not really there. People are disillusioned, like the public thinks or they believe what the news says, but the reality on the ground is only you and I both know that it's not the truth. We're still working short. We're still working hours and days upon days without having a break. But nobody knows that we are the ones who actually care for our residents and our patients or clients, not the big the people who have the shares or the people who own these business. It's us. It's always been us and it will always be us. We're the ones who are making sure that we are there so that they don't need to go without. So remember that it is important for you to vote. Your vote matters. One vote makes a difference. Is there anything that you would like to tell them before you go that I didn't ask you that you would like them to know?
Not really. The one thing I would hone in on maybe as my last thing is you're absolutely right. Every vote does count. I have volunteered in elections, and part of that responsibility is to watch as they count the vote. And I can't say how many times one box with one poll depended on one vote. When it was 51 for candidate A, 52 for candidate B. And if you don't go out and vote, someone else is going to go out there and vote against your needs and your priorities. So go and vote, please.
Yes, because your voice matter and you voting is speaking up. Okay? You're saying I'm here and I matter.
That's right.
Anyways, I'm so happy and I'm so thankful that you came. And I'll invite you back.
Absolutely. Looking forward
I don't
to it.
know if you will come.
Absolutely.
Oh my
Thank you guys for
God.
doing this. This is amazing.
Thank you so much. So guys, go out and vote. It matters, okay? I always say, if they're not speaking your language, that is healthcare, they're not speaking to you. Anyways, don't forget to comment, like, subscribe, share this video, guys, with your mama, papa, auntie, sister, uncle, brother, friends, and even your enemies them. And until next time, this is Kelly, and